Just the facts, ma'am, just the facts. While the U.S. Supreme Court heard constitutional arguments against the Biden administration's vaccine mandates, a friend of the court brief filed by another group provided the court with scientific reasons to strike down the president's order. Well, joining us to explain is Phil Kerpen. He's president of American Commitment Foundation. Okay, Phil, it's interesting because I know your group filed an amicus brief not based on the constitutional merits of the vaccine mandates, but based on science. What did you share with the court? Please explain.
Well, there's an Alice in Wonderland quality to the court debating vaccine mandates when the vaccine that they want to mandate was designed for a virus from 2 years ago that no longer exists, and the vaccine is extremely ineffective against the Omicron virus that's now everywhere, which is obvious from the fact that the places with the highest vaccination rates have everyone coming down with the thing. And in fact, two of the lawyers had to phone in to the Supreme Court. One of them, who was triple vaccinated, had to phone in because he himself has COVID at the moment. And the other part of our brief is that the Omicron variant, which is now totally dominant, is much less severe than the previous variants, much more akin to a typical respiratory virus, and therefore doesn't present a grave danger. So we wanted to update the justices on what's actually happening right now in the world, which we think completely negates the logic of these vaccine mandates.
Well, it seems the court needed that, especially Justice Sotomayor. But what if a new variant comes along, Phil, one that may be worse than the Omicron? What then?
Well, I think that's unlikely. Typically, viruses evolve in the direction of lower virulence and greater transmissibility, which is certainly what we're seeing right now with Omicron. And I also think part of the good news story here, which we also mentioned in our brief, is that Omicron infections are highly protective against Delta and likely would be highly protective against any other CoV-2 infections. And so the massive numbers of infections that we're seeing right now could actually be a really good news story if future variants do arise, because they likely will mean very high levels of population immunity and protection against those future variants. Obviously, if the factual circumstances change, then we'd be having slightly different arguments about policy. But, you know, a brand new virus with totally different properties could also arise tomorrow. And so that's a very hypothetical. I think we need to be focused on what's actually happening right now and give up on policies that were, predicated on a very different virus that's not around anymore.
And I've got to ask you about the argument that the president is actually unconstitutionally creating legislation with these mandates, and that OSHA does not have the authority to issue non-occupational directives, orders that affect safety beyond the workplace. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's a very strong argument, especially when you have the White House chief of staff essentially admitting that this was a workaround to impose a national vaccine mandate, using sort of whatever authorities they could grab off the shelf and twist to that purpose. And I think that that's the most likely grounds that we'll see a Supreme Court decision on, what they call their major questions doctrine, which is the idea that if Congress wants an agency to do something, they don't hide that desire in some 50-year-old statute with some obscure provision. They make it very clear and they do it very directly. And I think that's certainly a true argument and a compelling one. But I also think, and I think, I also thought it was important that analysis take place in a context where the court is not overly panicked or misinterpreting or misperceiving what's happening right now with the virus and with the science. And so, yeah, I think, even if the virus hadn't changed and the vaccine were highly effective and the virus were more dangerous, I would still be against these mandates on legal and constitutional grounds. But I just think, I don't even think the court needs to get that far based just on the circumstances, the way they've changed.
Yeah, so, I mean, years ago, Howard Phillips always told me, follow the money. And this one is follow the science. And the vaccine administrative and paid time off cost to many businesses would be unsustainable. Just for the average merchandise store, I understand it would be about $250,000. Add that to the store's operating costs. So wouldn't they just pass that cost on by raising their prices? It seems like this could result in government-mandated hyperinflation.
Yeah, no question, especially if businesses do opt for the testing and masking option. There's a major ongoing operational cost associated with that would get passed on. But I think the biggest economic disruption here comes from attrition, from employees who have declined the virus to this point probably had pretty strong reasons for doing so, either religious or medical or just personal beliefs. And a lot of them, if told they're going to be fired if they don't take the vaccine, will say, okay, I quit. And so employers will face a loss of a lot of mission critical employees at a time where we have a very tight labor market. They're not going to be able to replace those people. And so I think the biggest economic impact of this is going to be exacerbating the labor shortage, which is really going to hamstring our economy.
Well, we're already seeing the effect of some of that on police forces, fire, nurses, and hospitals. No wonder hospitals are overwhelmed. A lot of people changing jobs and staying home. So, Phil Kerpen, thank you for being with us. We appreciate your insights.
My pleasure.